today's webinar, Building Collective Leadership Effectiveness, Strengthening Leadership Teams across teams and systems to navigate complexity and drive results. We are thrilled to have you with us today for this conversation about how leaders, coaches, and others can better understand and leverage the collective dynamics shaping their teams and organizations. Leading this conversation today is Jose Manuel Gil, Leadership Circle's Director of Business Development and Client Relationships for EMEA and Latin America. Jose Manuel has more than 2 decades of experience at the intersection of leadership development, business strategy, and cultural transformation. In his role here at Leadership Circle, he partners with organizations to connect leadership effectiveness with strategy, execution, and measurable results. Throughout his career, Jose Manuel has led international initiatives that support leaders and teams in strengthening their alignment, improving their performance, and navigating growth in complex environments. And known for being both approachable and strategic, he is not afraid of having courageous conversations. He often uses his skills as an active leader and listener and insightful facilitator to spark honest dialogue that allows collective intelligence to emerge. His work is grounded in the belief that strong businesses are built on healthy cultures and conscious leadership, and that real impact comes from connecting strategy with humanity. I don't think I could say it any better than that. It is my pleasure to welcome you, Jose Manuel. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and welcome everybody for being here. Thank you so much. Let me start just right with a question for you. I've seen in the chat, in the poll, that many of you are both leaders and coaches, or have plenty of coaches here as well. So let me just kick off this with one question. What happens when we help a leader grow, but send them back into a system that has not evolved with him or her and cannot support that growth? It never happens to you? Right. So what happened? If you feel free to share in the chat, whatever you think, right? So I like the response of Peter Drucker to this question. Culture, it's a strategy for breakfast. And they do its leadership too, right? Which means it doesn't mean that really a strategy or leadership is not important to the life of the culture. Not at all. What really means is that when this culture remains unnoticed and discussed, people is not aware of it. It's just something which is inside of the DNA of the company. This culture takes the leading role of the organization. It plays the major role. It really have everything in control. So this is something important because today we are going to present like 3 things that makes a difference when it comes to build collective leadership effectiveness. And the first thing we want to start with is this: reveal what the leadership culture is in the system is. Make it visible. So the first step in order to really make a sustainable and powerful transformation in terms of leadership culture, it means that we need to really reveal what's the culture in the system. Otherwise, as I mentioned, it will take control of everything. But when we're talking about culture of leadership, what we're talking about? So culture determines how decisions are made when there are no clear instructions, or what are the behaviors that are repeated under pressure, or when there are some priorities that fight against each other, which one takes precedence, which one is winning. And also what happened with feedback. Is it given? How is it given? Or it's avoided? That's something that is not part of us. And there are some assumptions about what is good leadership, right? And we also have, as members in the company, an idea, an assumption of what's risky and what things we don't need to question, or it's better not to question them. So this is something that is there, even though we don't speak about. So when this happens, it also lives together with something which is the challenges that many organizations face. Strong individual leaders, but also some misalignment. Sometimes the executions get slower. Some decisions repeat over and over again. Sometimes you feel the tension, but nobody is able to name it. Sometimes there is a distance between execution and strategy. We see friction between leaders. We have feel alignment, but not momentum. So there is plenty of things that this is the day-to-day of any organization today. So that's the first thing I wanted to mention. So if we're not able to reveal the system and how it works, it will have control over us, not the other way around. But this is the first condition, the first thing that makes a difference in our interventions as coaches and for the leaders to really achieve a sustainable and deep transformations. We need to reveal that. And the second thing that we are going to talk about, because this is fundamental. This is the connection between the first thing just mentioned and the third thing that I'm going to mention in a while. We need a map and a compass. And let's be honest for a while. Today, in the market, in the leadership development market, companies are not willing to pay just for good presence, for powerful questions, for good listening skills. And to make it clear, I'm not saying that this is not essential. It is essential, but it's not enough. We are living in a world of complexity without any precedents in the history. So complexity is huge. And in the face of this complexity, organizations are asking for more clarity. Where are we now in terms of leadership? Direction. Where do we need to point at? They're asking also for evidence. Is there data that can tell us where we are staying right now and where do we need to move? And also we need a framework that really tells us what's good leadership and what is not. So this is something, again, that it's very important, and it creates a huge difference in the way we accompany leaders to grow and transform not just individuals, but also system or specialist systems. Right. So we're going to talk about, I don't know how many of you know about the leadership circle model, but let me talk about something, which is our main framework. I want to stay a few moments here, right? So this is what we believe, right? This is our model. And again, it's a framework in which all the presentation we're doing is based. And the cases we're going to present at the end of this presentation, it's also based on intervention realized with this model. So, first of all, something that we firmly believe: leadership is not just a set of skills or behaviors. It's a way of being. It's an identity thing, which means that it's our internal mindset, our beliefs, our fears that shape the way we show up as leaders in the world. So in Leadership Circle, we know that we have series of creative competencies highly correlated with leadership effectiveness, oriented to purpose, to building things together, connected with my authenticity, my inner values. And these creative competencies, as we will see in a few moments, are highly correlated with leadership effectiveness. And we don't say that this because we feel it, because we say it because we know it. We have hundreds of thousands of leadership effectiveness assessments that shows what I'm telling to you. But also as humans, we also sometimes are driven by fear, the need of protection. So we activate a series of behaviors that, even though they are not bad by themselves, when we overuse them, it really creates an impact. So we're going to see them in a minute. But based on this, also we have a part of our model that inform us about our capacity to build relations, and also our capacity of focusing on what matters the most and our tasks, right? So when we do this, we have like different quadrants, right? We have reactive relationship, creative task, and reactive tasks, competencies or tendencies. Let me just make a closer look to what I'm saying. So on the one hand, we have these creative competencies. They are competencies about relating, how we get the best of people around us, not just our direct reports, our peers, or even our boss, of our clients, our customers. And there's a number of creative competencies that we have there. We also have self-awareness, which is, it has to simplify it, how do I lead myself? Because if I am not able to lead myself, I won't be able to lead others, to inspire others. So there's a number of competencies around that. We have this authenticity, our capacity to speak the truth, our capacity to be authentic. What we say, when we do, are totally aligned. And we have the capacity to, with courageous authenticity, to name the elephant in the room from a place of where, from a place of integrity, of purpose, connected to the purpose. We also have this set of competencies that we call system awareness that allows us to see the whole picture, right? It's a very evolved type of competencies. It requires, a more evolved mindset. And we also have the achieving, which is obviously something which is absolutely important for any leader. What we know now that we didn't know some decades ago is that, okay, this by itself, it's not enough. We need the rest of the competencies to really achieve results with the right amount of energy. So these are creative competencies, and these competencies, as mentioned, as science shows and statistics shows, are highly correlated with leadership effectiveness. These graphs are showing just that the higher each of these dimensions, the dimension is, the leader is seen as a more effective leader. So there is a direct correlation, which is, by the way, very high. Everything above 60% or 0.6, it's huge. It's representative. We are talking about higher scores, higher rates. And let me talk a little bit about the reactive tendencies, right? So very, very rapidly. So we have three types of reactive tendencies: complying, which means I put my value on being accepted, on being loved. Is that wrong? Not, of course it's not. The thing is, when you overuse that, you can probably tend to avoid conflict, to make hard decisions, because what is at stake is your own value, self or sense of value. Then we have these protecting tendencies based on my capacity or my need to look like the smart guy in the room. It's my capacity. It's a gift in the sense that it brings wisdom. However, when I overuse it again, it can create this type of arrogance or criticism or distance, looking like very rational, right? Which is not inspiring at all. And then we have this other reactive tendency, which is controlling. And when we're talking about controlling, again, control means that I put my value in getting my results done. And everything of me is related to look worthy through my results, which again has enormous gifts. But when I use it too much, it can compromise relationships, strategy. But because from here, and you can relate to the other aspects of achieving, right? Here, the energy is of controlling, pushing, whilst in achieving was more strategic, right? So we have the creative competencies, we have the reactive tendencies, and we are able to measure them. And on the contrary, what we saw with the creative competencies, we see here an inverse correlation to leadership effectiveness, which means that the higher this tendency is showing up in the leader, the less effective this leader is. So by measuring this, we have data. We can measure this, of course, at an individual level, but, and this is what we are going to talk about right now, also at collective level. So we can really run assessments on a system, and by a system, I mean a team. It could be an intact team, could be a business unit, could be a whole company, right? So this is what we can do through this kind of assessment. First of all, is presenting evidences, not just theories or not just assumptions. This is evidence. And we have data, and the data, it doesn't judge, right? It's just information that we need to discuss and reveal, and we need to make meaning of it, right? But it's so important. So what we see here is when we have related to all these competencies and tendencies that we just saw. Here we see something which is, you see a blue shading, which is the actual collective leadership of this group of leaders of this team or this organization. And then you have also that we also measure, which is this gray line, which is the desire, the ideal, right? So we have these two elements. We have the ideal, where the people of the organization thinks they need to go. This is an assessment that is run with people in organizations. And we also have our actual. And there is this gap. So by having this information, what we are able is to understand what is this bridge, what is this gap, what is this distance, because the leadership we have today and the leadership we think we need to have. That's why a map is so important. So when we look at this gap, what we can see, the gap between the actual and desired, we can decide where to put the spotlight on how collective leadership affects the culture. It also reveals information that establishes a compelling rationale for change. It also provides insights into how a strong vision and desire for change is. So through this gap, we can see, okay, what's the difference or the distance we need to navigate, right? And also indicate where the most energy for change is in the system. I mean, if I have a big gap, it informs us, that the work to do with that gap is huge, right? So it needs much more energy and help direct leaders to where the most critical conversations for effectiveness can be had linked to strategy. And we are going to talk more about this through very specific examples. So if this information is just an introduction and just a presentation, we want to present our case through something real, right? So we're here to present some experiences that we have had with organizations doing this work. Before moving forward, just checking, is there anything that you would like to ask so far? Any question in the chat?
Actually, I would love to ask a question, Jose.
Good.
I'm Dana Galen in
Hi, Dana.
Atlanta. I am wondering, do we have access to the actual competencies or do we just see the inner circle?
No, that's a good question. No, we have access to the whole set of competencies, of course. The reason why we present the inner circle only is because when we talk to a team, okay, it's easier if we go from the inside to the outside, right? So we start by the inner competencies, but then we elevate the conversation or we go deeper, right? But we have access to everything. That's super important question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jose Manuel, another question came up, which is, are these the desired, the ideal that you showed, and what's actually in the actual that you showed on the graph? Are those from the self-assessment or from the 360?
Well, it's not a 360. So this is how it works, right? So you have a group of, leaders or a team or whatever, and you ask each one of them about the collective leadership assessment, how they perceive it, right? So it's not a 360. So you ask the same questions twice. First of all, this set of questions on how is the actual leadership in this company? And then a second set of questions, which is what's the ideal, according to you, of course, right? And we will talk about this later as well. So it's not a 360. However, and I'm going to present a case now, we can make it a little bit like a 360, even though it's not a 360. And just by showing the example, you will see it very clearly. I have another hand raised. Gita?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Gita Ramachandran. So the question I have is slightly twofold. One is when we say whole team, it seems understandable that every single member of the team does the leadership assessment, and then you get a collective sort of picture. And but then when it comes to business unit company, is the expectation that every single member of the company, or are we talking about only every single leader of the company, or what constitutes the whole when we say business unit and company is the first question. And the other side question is, when we say ideal and that line there, I'm used to the individual leadership circle profile, and there is that differentiation I can understand there. That line means self-assessed, and the shaded is how we show up to the others. Whereas here, I'm unable to get my head around what could ideal mean. Who defines ideal?
Yeah, who defines ideal? Right, that's a good question. I mean, it's by a very simple question, which is, what do you think will be the ideal behavior in each question, right? So it's something very subjective, and as you can imagine, and this is a beautiful conversation. What you think is the ideal is not necessarily what the company needs, but that's a beautiful combination, a beautiful conversation as well. So And also, I think you will see through the example, but that's a question. So who defines that? The people. What they're saying is what would be the ideal for you, right? Regarding to your first question about the amount of people to be included in this survey, this assessment, is not very different to the typical poll that you have before the election, right? So you need to find a group of a significant group of people. Typically, it very much depends, right? So, for instance, I will present a case of a company that has a big amount of people, but they decided to invite more than 100 people representing different areas and business units of the company. So you decide what's the right sample for that. Of course, if the company is very big, you have 20,000 people, you can ask them, right? But then you choose like 500 people, whatever you think it's a right number. But it's not just the number of people; it's that they really represent the different views of the parts of the company, right? So let me use this example that I think is going to probably give some light to some of the things that we have been discussing so far. So this is an intervention that we did with a financial company. Let me bring some context to the company. So they have more than 1 century of history, and they had a leading market position. But what happens in the last few years, they really lost market share. Because why? Because there were new players entering the market. Also the competition was working hard and gained some advantage in the market share. And they decided that it was time to do that. Probably they decided even too late, right? So they changed the company, they changed the board, they changed the C-suite. Many people there were new, and they decided to make a shift from a model focused on managing, promoting individual products. Is like, so I am a bank, I offer my products to my competition, and to shift from that perspective is what they needed at that time. They needed to do anything different from that because they didn't really have competition. They have a solid position in the market, and that was it, right? But then they decided that that needed to change. So they decided to go to a model where people is centered on the client, putting the client in the center. So they went from being promoters of the product to be advisors, to get closer to the client, to put the client on the center of the strategy, which sounds really cool. But also they realized that after a couple of years working on that, there was a big gap between aspiration and reality. That was one of the reasons they came to us. So while the strategy called them for advisory, trust, and long-term relationships, there were some practices, again, a culture that incentivates different kind of behaviors, which were, what they had been using for sometimes decades. Something that was important in this bank is that they have a significant amount of people, with an age of 45 or even older, right? So that was important. So they hired us with a challenge in mind. We need to build the leadership DNA that will drive the bank's strategic transformation. We are working on that. We are not successful enough, but we feel that there is something in the middle between strategy and execution, which is leadership. And they want us to help them with it. So this is what we did. We did a collective leadership assessment. to ask a good amount of people how the company's leadership culture is perceived. And again, with the question how it is today and how it needs to be. So we decided to take the point of view of more than 100 evaluators, corresponding to different management levels, including the C-suite, of course, and also different antiquity. So people in the company of people from 3 to 10 years and even more than 10 years. We decided that after gathering all this information and processing, we will deliver the results to the C-suite, which we did in one full day session in person. And so this is what we expected as a result of this. So, and before talking about what happened there, I think this is the moment to introduce the third element. So we've talked about, revealing the system is very important. We need a map and a compass, which is the universal model. And then we need to make sure that this is not about skills and behaviors. It's about mindset. And that's something really important. So what was the conversation really about? So we tend to say that there are two types of conversations when we are doing a coaching process, both individual or collective, right? We have one set of conversation, let's call it conversation A, which is about what we see, what are the competencies, the patterns, the behaviors, what are the gaps, something that is there, right? And people is very much aware. And if they are not aware through the data, they can really make sense of it. But there is another conversation, often much more uncomfortable, which is what drives the system. We're talking about what are the assumptions. So it means what we believe to be true, the mindset, and the belief system. And this always occurs in a more deeper place. So our job as coaches were helping organizations transform into a more effective collective leadership culture. It's not only bringing data, but using this data to really go deep into the assumptions, into the mindset, and to the beliefs of the system. That's the only way in which we can really make sustainable and profound transformations. So I could talk one whole day about what happened in that session, but we selected three very specific conversations, right? That we talk about that, connects very well with the mission of a coach while doing this work. First conversation, let's call it the bubble. So first conversation is, does everybody see the world as we do? So something that happens, right? And I'm going to also to answer one of the questions before about the 360 is, since we have more than 100 responses, we also organize the responses in different lanes. So what we did is, okay, let's see how the different groups of leaders in this company see the collective leadership. So we took people from different management levels, and we see the picture of them. We took also the C-suite view, and we have a picture of it, and we have some other views. But something important happened. Look at these graphs, right? I mean, probably you're not so familiar with the model. Okay, if you're familiar with leadership circle profile, that's it's going to be easier. But this is most of the people thought of the culture of the company, which means that highly creative and, let's say, medium reactive, right? With some interesting areas. But it's a company, highly creative company, great leadership, right? But this is how the C-suite look at the collective leadership within the company. look at the difference. It looks like there are two completely different companies. Amazing, right? So we say, okay, so it shocked a lot because when we're talking with the C-suite, well, okay, it means that we have a completely different vision of how the leadership in this company is, right? And at the beginning, it was who is right or who is wrong, but that was not the real conversation. The conversation was completely different. Even you can see like these different views, right? So you see these people, it's very, very much aligned. You can see small differences, but this one, the one with the C-suite, is hugely different. It's totally, it's a completely different view. So we were talking about that and what's going on, right? And also talking with the C-suite, what's on you in this difference, right? So they really got your super beautiful insights. But one of them is, okay, again, this is not about who is right. It's about communicating and aligning towards a shared vision. Not only the why, but the how and the what, which means that maybe we have our vision, but surely we didn't succeed on sharing that vision with the rest of the company and how they needed to shift their leadership. So they decided after the conversation that they need to put some energy on that. So this was one of the conversation. Let's take a look at the second one. Let's call it the contradictory triangle. And it starts with this question: what is the system manifesting through this data? And then we saw interesting things here. So look at this. So we have about these three very specific dimensions of the circle. Balance, which means, the balance between the personal and professional life. Actual was a medium score, but ideal, it was super high. It means we need to make a shift here, a shift that somehow is confirmed, but something that's also a dimension in the creative part, which is sustainable productivity, which is to what extent what we are doing is also thinking in the mid-term, in the long term, not just the short term. It's not about reacting and solving something right now. It's about creating something that is going to be sustainable in the future. So, and again, you see a huge gap. But look at this. On the other hand, driven, which is, driven, it's something that inform us, that I am committed to a huge super effort to achieve things. It's never enough. I don't celebrate my achievements. I go to the next again, which is, let's say, it has an immense gift. It talks about the high ethical of work. It talks about commitment a lot. But also, when I use it too much, I again can compromise development of people. I don't have time to spend on developing my people or thinking strategically. So there is a contradiction when this is too high. But look at this. The actual was high, but the ideal was even higher. It means that I want some balance. I want that we think in sustainability. So we need to create solutions that is not going to be all the time, reacting and doing things just for a moment. But this is what we suppose it is expected. Can you see the contradiction here? So I need some balance. I need to think wiser on the things we do, but my immediate reaction and what is expected of me, and what I really celebrate in other people is that you give all the time your 140%. So it drives to a very beautiful conversation about, okay, what happened if I really start reducing a little bit this behavior, right? So because there are some things that I have fear to lose. So finally, after a beautiful conversation, they reframe their mindset. They say, yes, what we need to shift is from work hard to work smart, which means that we need to work with system awareness, being more strategic, and being able to challenge the status quo. And again, it was a beautiful conversation that completely changed the mindset of the company on how they approached the challenges, the projects they had, right? And it was very scary because that's not something that they can change overnight, right? So I have to do my experiments. And there is another third conversation that is also beautiful. Who is in the center? Is vision aligned with mindset? And this conversation happened because what they saw is that one of the competencies that they have is customer focus, which means the client is in the center of my decisions as a company, the products that we launch in the market, the way we approach our customers is very much based on customer focus. And look at this. Percentile is 33%, which means that more than 70% of leaders in the world score higher than myself in this competency because results are presented in percentiles, right? So that's interesting, right? So we really said that the business model is centered on holistic client advisory, but reality is that we are far from there. We suspected that. Now we have some evidence. But something important, collaborator, also a very low score, one of the lowest in the creative. And that's something that is not, it's common in both in the C-suite and the global results of the company. Collaborator means to what extent I am willing to collaborate with people in other business units or departments in order to create something which is meaningful for the client, right? Which means that the combination of two talks about there is a gap, there is a huge distance between what I want to achieve and what I am actually achieving. What they decided at that point is they have to ask themselves, or they started to ask themselves, what does it mean putting the client in the center? It's a very basic conversation that they didn't have. And they didn't land to the different business units in the company. So what does it mean for, a person in the bank office receiving a client? What means putting him in the center? What type of behaviors I should show to this client? And also how our business units are going to build together around that idea of putting the client in the center. So this is our 3 examples of conversations we have with a single client just because we have evidences, we have results that can really inform about not only the behaviors, but also the mindset behind those behaviors, right? So just as a reminder, the 3 things that makes a difference: reveal what the leadership culture is in the system and make it visible. Second, you need a map and a compass, you need evidence, not just ideas or conversations, right? So instead of being based on speculations, we based on real data. And it is not about skills and behaviors. We need to go deeper. It's about mindset. So these are the three things that makes a difference. And once said that,
Excellent.
questions and
Thank you, Jose Manuel. I'm going to ask you to stop sharing so we can see your face.
sure,
Ask
absolutely.
and get these
Thank you.
questions. So we've had a number of great questions in the chat, and I know one of them was actually noting that we had so many great questions in the chat, and is it possible to see the answers and the responses to those later? And I think Crystal, you responded that yes, we can ensure that that we can share those responses and the questions from the chat when we send out our resources after the recording. So just wanted to make sure that we called that out. We do have some good questions for you, Jose Manuel. If you have others, please drop them in the chat too, and we'll see what we can get to. So first, maybe an easy one to respond to around the real life example, the client example that you shared with us. There was a question asking if that client had used the leadership circle profile before using the collective assessment, the collective leadership assessment. And maybe generally speaking, is that something that has to happen?
Yeah. In this case, I mean, we can share examples of completely different approaches. In this case, they didn't take the LCP before. They were going to do it later. So the idea was, first, let's define our leadership DNA, what is necessary to make this transformation successful, and then we will work on us. Sometimes it's the opposite. I start by myself, right? And then I go to the collective. In theory, what we say is, okay, we need to start by yourself and then go to the collective. But that's pure theory that I don't really share completely, because the leader doesn't lead in the void. They lead in the system, right? Which means that as I am working on myself, I also need to start creating, the right environment. So I am more. I try to always recommend to our clients, you can start by any of them, depending on the objectives and everything. But sooner than later, you need to work on both things.
Great. Okay. Here's one question that came up. Does the emphasis change if the leadership goal is highly time bound? This is from someone who's working with a client and struggling to get his leaders to stay on track and move with speed as they're trying to drive revenue. And there really isn't time for what we would consider a transformational change. So does that change the emphasis or the goal of a collective leadership assessment if things are highly time bound?
Okay. Let me answer this question in this way. Okay, so sometimes what happens when we as coaches or our clients, right, think that the leadership and goals or strategy are like two different things. But this is not the case. When I heard I have time constraints, I need to dedicate my time to the business, what I'm hearing is that's the important thing. So our goal when this happens is through exercises like this. When you ask people, to invest some time doing together to talk about leadership and the strategic agenda, is that they really make this connection. Because believe me, when you present this data, they realize, or when you have this conversation, not just the data, when they make meaning of it, they realize that business and strategy and leadership are highly connected. And this, this dilemma somehow disappears. Of course, always the business will be predominant. If they have a fire to, they have to fight. But in a sense, what happens is the view of the leaders change completely when they see the connection, the real connection between strategy and leadership.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're going to take maybe time for one or two more questions before I wrap things up. And this is for especially for folks who are familiar with the Leadership Circle products. One question is asking, when would you use the CLA, the collective leadership assessment, versus when you would use the Bright team assessment?
Yeah, it's completely different. Even though they are addressed to the team. Okay, so Bright, it's an assessment. So let's start by CLA. CLA is directional, it's strategic. It talks about what's the leadership that is required to achieve our goals as a company. It's talking about behaviors and values. So this is what CLA is about. And you can apply CLA to any group of people. It could be, as I mentioned, a business unit, it could be a whole organization, or also a team. But you could apply it. Okay, let's see how is the leadership, the collective leadership in all, the second level of management within the company. Right? So you can apply to them. Bright can only be applied to a team, to an intact team. And what does, it measures leadership effectiveness. It's much more tactical. And it's a super powerful tool. I have been using it a lot, but it talks about how the dynamics amongst the team members are, working. And it reveals what type of dynamics between us are helping us to be more effective and what is draining our energy, right? Which is a completely different approach.
Excellent. Well, look, we've only got 3 minutes left to the top of the hour, so I think I'm going to wrap it up here. Like I said, if we didn't get to your question, we will do our best to maybe address it in our follow-up resources, or you can always feel free to reach out to us with additional questions, and we will do our best to respond. So with that in mind, let me just say thank you so much for joining us for this really great conversation, for the lively chat and the excellent questions that we saw come up. If you would like to learn more about Leadership Circle coaching or assessments and what they can do for your organization or for the organizations that you work for, let us know. Feel free to type yes in the chat and we'll follow up with you directly. Or you can visit the contact page on our website and reach out whenever you're ready. I invite you to join us next month in May. We're doing something a little different than our normal webinar format next month. We're spotlighting a pretty incredible story of how one company embedded leadership development within its organizational culture and DNA, and how that move boosted collaboration, performance, and ultimately results. It's going to be a really interesting panel discussion, and it will include organizational leaders and coaches who helped facilitate the program. I think you're going to love it. I believe Crystal just dropped the link in the chat. So if you are interested and want to learn more about that session, please check out that link and join us in May. You can also watch your inbox and Leadership Circle socials for details. One final thing, as soon as I'm finished talking, we're going to end this call, but do remember that we've been recording, and in about a week or so, you'll get an email with a link to that recording, as well as a summary of key takeaways from today's discussion and any other resources that come up between now and then that we think might be important to include. In the meantime, until then, on behalf of Leadership Circle and on behalf of our featured guest, Jose Manuel Gil, my name is Sarah, and I'm saying thank you again so much for sharing a little bit of your day with us. Take care, and we will see you all next time.